wait for 20 more seconds. Okay, yeah, let's begin the weekly seminar. So, welcome to our weekly seminar. So this is a Thursday seminar of the Institute of Political Science at Academia Sinica, and we are very happy to have you here. Especially, we have some new faces today, and today we are very honored to have Professor Dr. Antonina to talk about global implications of the China-India territorial dispute. And I think this is a very timely and important topic, especially when we talk about China and other international relation issues. And Dr. Antonina is a visiting scholar here, so he is a she is a faculty member of the, I might be wrong, but Jagiellonian University in Krakow. Yeah, Krakow. So, due to a time of interest, I said let's give the floor to Dr. Antonina. Thank you.
Thank you so much, distinguished professors, dear scholars, dear guests, dear friends. It is my real honor to be here today. It's a great honor to be a part of Academia Sinica, actually, which is a very well-known and prestigious research institution here in Taiwan. And I'm even more happy to be here today and to give this open lecture, and I'm very grateful that you decided to came here and want to know something more about the China-India territorial dispute. I know that we also have the YouTube broadcast live, so I would like to say hello to everyone who is watching this one as well. You might find it a little bit surprising, but I wanted to start my lecture with a story which has nothing to do with China-India relations. I don't know if you've heard about the island, which is called the Hans Island. It is a small island, rocky, uninhabited island, which is located on the western bank of Greenland. Greenland, so this huge island which is owned by Denmark. And this island is being disputed by Denmark and Canada. And we have a very funny story, you might say, which is related to this territorial dispute, because for the last 30 or 40 years, whenever the Danish patrol came, they were leaving the Danish flag and leaving a bottle of whiskey or brandy with regards to Canadians. After a while, Canadians were coming, they were replacing the flag, the Danish flag, with the Canadian flag, and also leaving a bottle of alcohol with regards to the Danish. And this has been going on for the last 30 or 40 years. So, why am I talking about this pretty funny story? I wanted to show that numerous countries in the world are involved in some sort of territorial disputes. So it's not just China and India. However, some of these conflicts, some of these disputes can be symbolic, can be historical, and not really meaningful or even funny, as in the Danish-Canadian case. But others can be very dangerous, meaningful, and can impact all of us if those countries want to make those conflicts be meaningful, be dangerous. And I'm afraid that this is the case of China-India territorial dispute, which, until recently, that's my impression, had been highly underestimated by many scholars and many journalists. I say many, not all of them. But when I was starting my PhD adventure in 2014, and I decided to write about China-India relations. My PhD thesis was actually dedicated to the role of the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence, which were coined in 1954, and their role in China-India relations up till nowadays. So, especially in the West, I'm not talking about like scholars in India or in China, but in the West, every time I was telling someone that this is what I want to pursue, usually, not always, but usually people were like raising eyebrows, like, okay, why China-India relations? First of all, it sounds exotic, in the West especially, and particularly in countries like Poland. But another thing is that, even if I talk to people who had some idea about international relations in Asia, they would say, well, yeah, we have a China-India dispute, but it's more about like status quo. Of course, there are skirmishes, once in a while they're shooting at each other, but, well, nothing big will happen, right? They won't use nuclear weapon against each other. So there will be a conflict, but it will be a local conflict, not a very meaningful one. This is what I could hear back in 2014, 15, 16. But the situation started to change around 2017, around the Doklam crisis, which I'm also going to talk about today. And particularly last year, and this is also the skirmish I'm going to talk about in June 2020, the news about the China-India border fights finally made their way to the global news. And remember, in the midst of pandemic, right, when the whole world was focusing on pandemic, on fighting with COVID-19, you could really come across news about the China-India skirmish, which proves how important, how meaningful that was. So this is also something I would like to stress today, that China-India border dispute is not just a meaningless local conflict. It is a very serious dispute which in the 21st century might impact on all of us, because it might have really serious regional, continental, and global consequences. So let me proceed to a small, introduction number 2, or the second phase of the introduction. So, of course, China-India relations is a very, very broad topic. So I would like to focus on 3 main matters: on the border issue itself, on the water issue, and on the Tibetan issue as elements of regional implications of the China-India dispute. And then I will proceed to the China-US rivalry and how China-US relations impact on China-India relations, and what these triangle, let's say US-India-China triangle, has to do with the border issue, and how, because of those complicated relations, how the border issue might actually evolve. So let me start with the border issue itself. Paradoxically, it's not a very old issue, and that's a very old dispute, because actually it started in 1950. We all know that China and India are 2 ancient civilizations, yes, but in fact they've never been neighbors, because they were separated by Himalayas. So in ancient times they did not really have any direct contacts with each other. There was some trade contacts, cultural contacts, but they were not like direct, face to face, at the border line, because they were separated by Tibet and by the Himalayas, quite naturally. So the moment when PRC annexed Tibet in 1950, this was the moment when modern China, so PRC, and modern India, modern post-colonial India, actually became neighbors for the very first time in their history. There are many reasons factors behind the border dispute. There are historical reasons, because the issue of Indian-Tibetan border had not been solved during the times of the British colonialism. There were such attempts, but these issues had never been solved. So in 1950, India and China kind of inherited an issue which had earlier not been resolved by the British. It was in a way created by the British and later left by the British, but this is something typical for colonial conflicts. However, apart from historical and ideological reasons, I would say that today, in 21st century, Chinese government does not find it beneficial to solve the China-India border dispute. I would say back in 1950s, even in like 1960s, a chance for resolving the border dispute was not very high, but I would say still higher than today. Because today, particularly the Chinese government, because China is obviously the one who is much stronger and much more dangerous to the other side, so to India. So the Chinese government might use the border dispute for the blackmailing practice. And I'm going to talk about this blackmailing practice more in a minute. What I mean by blackmailing practice, I mean that the border dispute cannot be treated separately from other issues of China-India relations. Whenever we have some skirmish or clash at the border, we know that it is either a result of some other problems in China-India relations, or the consequences of the border issue will come up, for example, in economic relations. So, unfortunately, we cannot treat the border issue as something separate. It is very well, unfortunately, linked to all other aspects of China-India relations. And the perfect example was brought to us in June 2020. So this is the skirmish I've already mentioned in my introduction. In June in 2020, in Pangong Valley in Ladakh, in northern India, there was a clash between Indian and Chinese soldiers. A clash in a very paradoxical way, let's say, in a very original clash, because Chinese and Indians are not allowed to carry weapons in the border areas. So it was literally a fist fight. They were literally fighting with fists and sticks, but the results were pretty serious. So we know that 20 Indian soldiers died. They died directly in the clash or as a result of wounds. Also, remember, Himalayas, very low temperatures during the night, so the temperature, body shock after getting wounded, and so on and so forth. So this number actually raised after a while. Officially, 5 Chinese soldiers died, officially, because China never provides real information, right? So let's say that 5 Chinese soldiers died. Indian resources claim that there were actually more Chinese soldiers died than Indians, but it's also something we cannot confirm. What is important and what makes this clash super serious and super important is that these were the first recorded casualties in the China-India border dispute since 1975. So for a long time, the border issue was still ongoing, but at least there were no official casualties. This time it was much more serious, and the consequences of this border skirmish were also very, very serious, because it led to something unprecedented in the human global history. Human history, not just China-India relations history, but human history, because it led to the deployment of 100,000 soldiers, both from the Chinese side and from the Indian side, along the so-called line of actual control. So this is the de facto border between China and India. I'm saying de facto because this is the real line which shows us where Chinese control the territory and where their power ends, like where the Indians are actually in control. So this is the line which goes high up in the Himalayas, and along this line, those 100,000 soldiers were deployed for the winter of 2020-21. For the winter, okay? Napoleon lost, right, during his Russian campaign because of winter. Nazi Germany, well, in a way, also lost, among other reasons, because of fights during the Russian winter. So now we have to multiply it several times and think about the Himalayan winter, okay? And what kind of harsh conditions we have high up in the Himalayas, which is much worse than in Russia, okay? So much worse than what happened to Napoleon and Hitler's army. Fortunately, in mid-February, both sides finally agreed for the synchronized and organized disengagement, but only from one area, from the Pangong Lake area in Ladakh. So from this most sensitive area where those fights broke out. So you can see that this is, something which happened for the first time in human history, and it definitely symbolizes the state of China-India relations. So that was the military consequence, right? So how about other consequences? I've already mentioned that the problem with China-India border dispute is that it is closely linked to all other aspects of China-India relations. So this is the example. As a form of economic retaliation or revenge, if you prefer, India introduced a permanent ban on almost 60 Chinese applications. TikTok, WeChat, among others. You might say, well, apps, okay, you can survive without apps. But remember, India was supposed to be the biggest foreign market for that kind of apps. So you can imagine what kind of economic blast it was to Chinese apps. There is another very symbolic aspect related to Indian government's decision, because Indian government openly went against the 1988 consensus. Back in 1988, Rajiv Gandhi, the Prime Minister of India, and Deng Xiaoping met in China during Rajiv Gandhi's visit to China, and they decided officially to separate China-India border dispute from all other aspects of China-India relations. So they said, okay, we know we do have a problem, but let's not make our problem impact on all other aspects of our bilateral relations. Let's give a boost to China-India economic relations, to cultural relations, to people-to-people relations. And this was pretty much successful back in 1990s, and especially in early 2000. Yet, last year, 2020, we had a decision, Indian government decision, which went totally against this consensus. So you can see how meaningful the Indian government's decision was. It was a very brave, you might even say plucky decision, right, to kind of mess with China in that way. It was very brave and very risky, but it seemed that it worked in some way, at least. At least we did have this disengagement in the Himalayan area. So this was the 2020 example. I would also like to tell you something about 2017 example. So the skirmish, which probably was the most serious one up till 2020. So from 1975 till 2020, till the Pangong Valley crisis, the Doklam standoff was the most serious one. So it lasted for 2 months in summer 2017, and we actually have 3 countries involved here: India, China, but also Bhutan. So you can see I marked Bhutan with a different color. I did it on purpose because I want to stress how many countries are actually involved in the China-India border dispute, or how many countries actually can suffer because of the ongoing China-India border dispute. So, on June 16, Chinese troops started extending a road, rebuilding a road, and they claimed that it was still the territory of China. However, Bhutan raised voice and said, no, 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 this is already our Bhutanese territory. Chinese troops cannot build a road on our Bhutanese territory. What makes the situation more complicated is that this is the region which is very close to the tri-junction between China, India, and Bhutan, as you can see. You can see that there is a very narrow neck, or a very narrow road, which connects the main Indian territory with the small eastern part of India, right? Maybe I should use a pointer, or maybe I should use at least here. Yeah, this will be better, I guess. See? So this is this very, very narrow road, or narrow neck, which connects this small part of Indian territory with the rest of the country, which makes it extremely, extremely important from the strategic point of view. India reacted quickly, because India is officially responsible for Bhutan's foreign policy. According to the Bhutanese law, it is Indian government which is responsible for the shape and for executing Bhutan's foreign policy. So since India treats Bhutan as its younger brother, which is in a way sometimes a problem, because sometimes India takes Bhutan's support for granted. But in this case, Indian troops were sent right away, And for 2 months, Chinese and Indian troops were facing each other, eyeball to eyeball, ready to attack each other, ready to start another war, pretty much. So you might see that the situation was very serious and dangerous. And surprisingly, Chinese troops decided to withdraw only 1 week before the BRICS summit. BRICS summit, which was at that time organized back in China. So, on one hand, you might say that, well, it is all staged, that China, whenever it wants, it can heat the conflict up. So this is the bad news. But the good news is that it can also lower the temperature if it wants to, which tells us that still the China-India border dispute is being controlled. So this is good news, right? I mean, at least someone has some influence on what's going on there. However, what makes the situation even more meaningful is what happened afterwards. So the Doklam crisis was resolved in August, but later on we had the so-called Brahmaputra flood. So this is one of the three main rivers which goes through South Asia, apart from Ganges and Indus. So as you can see in the map, Brahmaputra starts in Tibet and then it flows through India and through Bangladesh, right, down to the Indian Ocean. So what's the connection between Brahmaputra flood and the Doklam crisis? It is said by many scholars, much more clever than myself, okay? This is not my idea. This is what I read from much more clever persons than myself, that this was a form of retaliation, or again, a revenge, if you prefer, from the Chinese, because China did not share crucial hydrological data with India. In other words, China did not warn India that, beware, flood is coming. You have to get prepared. You have to evacuate people, and so on and so forth. China did not do that, despite the fact that there is an agreement between China and India which forces China to do so. China, as China, had an excuse, and Beijing said that, well, those hydrological stations were at that time being upgraded, there were some reparations and so on, some repairs and so on and so forth, and this is why it could not share any data with India. It definitely sounds like an excuse, and it is claimed that it was a form of retaliation after the Doklam crisis. So this leads us to another interesting connection between the border dispute with the water issue, with the water crisis. So here I should probably make another reference which theoretically has nothing to do with China-India relations. We are in Taiwan right now, and we know that we have a serious drought here in Taiwan. So I think it makes us all understand very well how water issue is important, that this is just a matter of future. This is something that we won't be able to escape from. So what we can do is just to get prepared for the climate change, for the global warming, and try to, well, manage water in a better way. We have to learn how to store water, how to divert water, right? How to save it, and not take it for granted, because we are not lucky enough. We won't be lucky enough to take it for granted anymore in the future. And in the case of China-India relations, this is an extremely serious matter, yet again, kind of underestimated and not really widely talked about, but this is definitely maybe even the more important consequence than the territorial dispute itself or per se. So the thing is that Tibet is crucial for China, and this is probably the main reason why China will never ever let Tibet go, apart from historical, ideological, political issues and so on and so forth. Because Tibet is the source of life, literally speaking, because this is the place from which most important rivers which flow to South and Southeast Asia start from. So we're talking about Indus, Ganges, Brahmaputra, also Mekong, which is crucial to Southeast Asia. So if you think about it, it actually impacts on countries such as Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, but also Nepal, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, Vietnam, Myanmar, right? So almost all South Asian and Southeast Asian countries. In total, almost 50% of global population, half of us, half of humanity, depends on those rivers. In other words, depends on what China does high up in the Himalayas, high up in Tibet. Because China has already built and keeps building river dams. Huge river dams, which first of all work as power plants. So this is how China is trying to produce energy. Of course, with such a rapid development, economic development that China is undergoing, it is, it has this power hunger. I mean, power, I'm talking about electricity, right? Not like the control. This one also, but right now I'm talking about the electricity hunger. So this is how these dams are being used, but this is not the only aim of their existence. They can also be used to store or divert water, which means that China can single-handedly decide to turn off the taps on those dams. It means that the water will stop flowing down the river flow, right, down the stream. This has already happened. This is not a, scary story for children. This is what has already happened several times actually, including early 2021. Because in January, China decided to turn off the taps on one of the dams on the Mekong River. As a result, the water level on Mekong River dropped by 1 meter. You might say 1 meter, maybe not that much, but imagine what that means to transportation and farming in all those countries in Southeast Asia, in Myanmar, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, right? So it seriously disrupted farming and river transportation in those countries. Plus, there is a drought as well in Southeast Asia right now. So, like naturally, the water level of Mekong is not high enough. And then we have China's decision, China who decides to turn off the taps so there is even less water, right? So now we can imagine that this can be used as a form of blackmail. Yet again, a blackmail of China against South Asia, so against India, maybe Bangladesh, as well as Southeast Asian countries. It can be a form of retaliation for anything they do. For example, if they sign an agreement with the United States, which is anti-Chinese and too much pro-American, China can use it as a punishment for those countries. So this was probably the most important, actually, issue of all of these aspects that I want to talk about today. However, we still have to remember about the Tibetan issue, Tibetan in political and cultural sense. Because we all wish Dalai Lama, I guess, a very long life. However, a day will come when Dalai Lama will pass away and a successor will have to be found. This will be probably one of the most important, most serious political, cultural, social issues in China-India relations in coming 5-10 years maximum, I guess. We have to remember that India is the place where the biggest Tibetan minority or immigration lives. So for India, it's particularly important because of the border, because of the Tibetan community, also because of the fact that since 1959, so since the Tibetan uprising, Dalai Lama has been living in India. So he found refuge in India, together with the Tibetan government in exile, which is not recognized by India. The Tibetan government in exile exists in India, but even by Indian government, it is not recognized. There is no single country in the world which recognizes Tibetan government in exile. Yet, We all understand how important it is, how influential it is. After all, Dalai Lama is a both spiritual but also political leader for Tibetan Buddhists. So not just for Tibetans, but also for many people in Mongolia, right? Because we are talking about the one of the branches of Buddhism. So Mongolians also, most of them follow the Vajrayana, so the Tibetan Buddhism. Why, you might say that Tibet is lost. I mean, what can we do as an international community? Can we do something about it? Can we stop the Chinese, the Communist Party of China, the government of China from interfering into Tibetan affairs? Because that's for sure. After Dalai Lama passes away, they will try to install the person of their own choice as the next, the successor, as the next Dalai Lama. Can we do something about it? Well, we might say Tibet is lost. That's gone for sure. However, there is a country, a pretty powerful country, still a powerful country, which takes this matter seriously and even passed some laws which are aimed at, in a way, punishing China if it tries to interfere in Tibetan affairs. Of course, this country does not do it because it cares for Tibetan people, but it cares for China and treats China as an enemy. So you might already be guessing which country I'm talking about. So of course, I'm talking about the United States, right? Not a big secret. So here comes the global impact or the global dimension. This is why China-India border dispute is not the regional dispute anymore. Because in recent years, the United States has been growingly, increasingly engaged in what's happening between China and India. So, in this part of the presentation, I would like to tell you something about not just words said by Americans, but about particular laws and agreements, okay, which prove that the United States recognizes the China-India border issue as one of the most important challenges of the 21st century. So, I should probably start with a small reference to 4 main military agreements which were signed between US and India. If you look at the dates, see, we have 2002, then we have a pretty big gap, then 2016, 18, and 20. So we can see a very rapid, like the speed up when it comes to China, the India-US alliance. Some people say, some experts say that US is actually building a new NATO-like project together with other countries, that is Japan and Australia. I guess we've all heard about the Quad, right? So the alliance between US, India, Japan and Australia. I would still be pretty careful with calling it a new NATO-like project because there is still a very long way until it really turns into a NATO-like initiative. Yet, we can clearly see that the alliance between US and India is becoming more and more tight. It is historically extremely important because since 1947, since the dawn of independence, India has been very careful with joining any military alliances. Officially, India was a neutral, non-aligned country. Officially. Because for decades, for example, it had very good relations with Soviet Union, especially military relations. So, yet again, this neutrality was very strong on the paper and in speeches. Yet, officially, India was a neutral country looking for the third alternative way towards bipolar division of the Cold War world. However, in recent years, we can see that India is being more and more closely tied with the United States. I would say that the Indian government is not really happy about it because India traditionally does not like to choose sides. It really prefers to be more neutral and play with various other players and be more careful and more vague in its policy. However, it seems that the China-India border dispute and the conflict with China, rivalry with China, is kind of pushing India to find a way to protect its northern borders. And it's no secret that the United States is still the only country which can counterbalance China, right? So this is the only way India has if it wants to protect its northern borders and find an alliance which will scare China off. We don't know if it will be successful. We have to wait and watch, but this is at least what Indian government is doing. So how about the United States perspective, the American perspective? In January 2020, just like 1 week before Donald Trump ceased to be the president of the United States, a very interesting document was declassified. The document is called U.S. Strategic Framework for the Indo-Pacific. The document itself did not reveal anything shocking or anything new, but it stressed two important things: that the United States recognizes the water issue and the China-India territorial issue as two continental challenges, right? Water issue and China-India territorial dispute. So this, you might say that the previous, the military agreements that I just showed to you, they are a proof that the United States really recognizes the border issue as one of the continental challenges in the 21st century. So how about the river issue? How about the water issue, right? The second continental challenge. In this matter, also many things have been done. For example, the Donald Trump State Department launched the so-called the Mekong Dam Monitor in December 2020. See, the document was declassified early 2021. The Mekong Dam Monitor, December 2020. See, so these are all very recent events, very recent decisions, which really show how everything is being wrapped up pretty rapidly. So this is an initiative which is aimed at providing real-time data on the Mekong River, so that these countries in Southeast Asia do not have to count only or depend only on China and the data China is providing to them, but they can use some other institutes and other sources of that kind of data. Moreover, a little bit earlier, just 2 months before that, in October 2020, the United States announced the Mekong-US partnership, which is aimed at investing $150 million in order to support the so-called economic independence of Burma or Myanmar, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, and Vietnam. So again, we can see that these are real actions, right? These are real agreements. These are not just words and declarations, which American government has always been good at, but these are real actions, real investments, which are aimed at counterbalancing China's influence. And how about the Tibetan issue? So we talked about deals with India in terms of military perspective. We talked about water issue. How about the Tibetan issue, the third one, the third branch or the third pillar I was talking about today? Again, December 2020, pretty recently, President Trump signed the so-called Tibetan Policy and Support Act, which states that the United States will put sanctions, including the denial of entry, on every Chinese official who will interfere in the election of the current Dalai Lama's successor. Moreover, the act also calls for opening the U.S. consulate in Lhasa, which is not very probable, I'm afraid, but it shows that the U.S. does recognize Tibetan issue as and the problem of the Dalai Lama's succession as one of the key elements in the coming years, at least in that region. So, what is extremely important is that now the United States has passed a stream of laws which are aimed at counterbalancing Beijing's aggressive behavior. Streams of laws, agreements, investment deals, which are related to China-India border dispute, to the water issue, to the Tibetan issue. All of them are aimed at counterbalancing China's behavior and China's influence, which means now it will be really difficult for Joe Biden to deviate from the politics of Donald Trump. I'm not claiming that in this regard, Trump's policy was wrong. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that if Joe Biden and his administration wanted to change the course of this policy, of those policies, it would be very hard for him because all of them are based or grounded on US Congress laws, right? So again, not declarations, real laws, real agreements. What is then crucial for us to understand is that the China-India border dispute has never been just a territorial dispute, but now it is becoming more and more clear that the whole region, the whole continent, or even the whole globe might be involved if something goes wrong in China-India relations. Particularly that now we have a pretty clear US engagement visible. Of course, it's always a matter of whether US will really follow its own laws and agreements. It's the same question here in Taiwan, right? What happens if China decides to attack Taiwan? Will the US really defend Taiwan? These are the questions to which we won't find answers until it really happens. So these are those perennial and really dangerous and serious questions. The China-India border dispute is the same sort of question. We don't know what would happen if another skirmish broke out, a skirmish which quite easily may lead to an open military conflict between China and India. Again, it's also a matter of calculations, whether China really wants to lead to that kind of conflict. The Doklam crisis and the 2020 skirmish showed that this conflict is still under control. But we're just human beings. We cannot control everything. We know from the history many incidents which evolved rapidly, quickly, out of control to open conflicts, right? So I'm afraid it's not always a matter of reasonable calculations. Sometimes things just go out of control. Apart from that, we also have to remember that Chinese government policy is very much based on ideology. It's the same thing about Taiwanese matter. It's all about ideology, ambitions of certain people, and ideology, the ideological aim of reunification. Because from the perspective of reasonable calculations, it doesn't make sense. But unfortunately, sometimes ideology wins. That's why whenever my students ask me, okay, so will there be another China-India border war like in 1962? Was it just an accident? Can it really happen again? I give them a very simple answer. I have no idea, because nobody has any idea. It's really difficult to predict. Let's hope it won't happen. Actually, I talked about this matter some time ago when I was in the US at Indiana University with Professor Sumit Ganguly, who is a very well-known specialist on India's foreign policy. And he told me, 5 years. We will have an open China-India conflict in 5 years. That was in 2018. I'm still counting. Okay, I marked the date in the calendar. I'm still counting. We still have some time before it might happen. I hope Professor Ganguly, with all my respect, is wrong. I guess we all hope that this won't really come true. But who knows? The recent skirmish in 2017, 2020, and the growing rivalry between China and India suggest that it is still pretty possible. If you want to know more and read more, please feel free to take a look at Two of the articles I had the huge pleasure and honor to co-author with Professor Patrick Mendes. So we published two articles, one in the Size Review of International Affairs and another one at Harvard International Review. So we focus on the matters of China-India border conflict, on the involvement of Taiwan also when it comes to China-India relations, and the geopolitics of water. I know that perhaps not too many optimistic conclusions can be drawn out of my presentation, but this is the world we live in, and I believe that, well, we have to face this reality, and especially that it's not all just about the military conflicts, right? I guess that we can clearly see that we have economic dimension here, we have the water issue here, which will probably more important in 40, 50, 60 years than all other issues, right? So we know pretty well that one day humanity will fight for water, will run wars for water. So perhaps in a long-term perspective, out of all these elements that I talked about today, this will be the crucial one for humanity in the future. So thank you very much for your attention. Feel free to share your ideas, to ask questions. I will do my best to answer as best as I can. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Antonina, for the very informative and insightful discussion on this important issue. So I forgot to introduce Dr. Antonina's Chinese name, which is very pertinent to the topic today, which is Lu Anning. So it's Anning is peaceful, and then Lu is the land. So today we are talking about territorial dispute. So we hope that your hope will come true regarding the 5-year prediction of the professor in the U.S. So now let's have the discussion with Dr. Antonina. So let's collect some questions. So before you talk about your question, please identify your name and the home institution to let us know more about you. Thank you. So any questions? Okay, Zhang Liao.
Thank you, Dr. Wu. I also heard from a U.S. professor that there will be open conflict in the Taiwan Strait in 6 years. So let's see what happens first. My name is Nianzhong Chen Liao, by the way. I'm from this institute. Thank you for your presentation. It's very interesting and very lively. But I have two questions about your presentation. First, I don't think alliance is an accurate term to describe U.S.-India relations. I think there be some kind of a partnership in some form of alignment based on mutual interest rather than mutual obligation. But alliance is we generally talking about a mutual defense treaty in the term of alliance. So maybe I'm too picky, but I think maybe you can reconsider the term. And my second question is, of course, I agree your conclusion that the U.S. role in the Indo-Pacific in large, the border issue will become a global issue or global challenges. But how about Russia's role? I think Russia may play some role in the mediation of the border issue this year. I want to hear your comment on that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for your comment and for your question. You're absolutely right that alliance is a, too strong expression. So yeah, I agree that probably partnership, as you suggested, would be a much better term. So thank you for that suggestion. I will definitely try to implement it in my future presentations. And when it comes to Russian involvement, yes, that's true that Russia has always been an actor in the backstage when it comes to China-India relations. It's even said or claimed, I'm saying said, claimed, wondered, because all these documents are still classified, so it's really hard to tell what really happened. But back in 1962 even, Russia was probably involved in resolving and cooling the atmosphere down when China-India border war broke out. So it's even claimed that both the Soviet Union and the Americans were kind of like playing in the backstage in order to force China to withdraw. So yes, I would say that Russia might play a role, but yet so far it doesn't seem it's openly engaged in the China-India conflict. I also think that right now Russia is a much more important player in Eastern Europe. We all know what's happening in the Eastern Ukraine. So even recently, I have a very interesting discussion with a PhD student from Russia who's doing his PhD here in Taiwan, and he was asked like about Russia's Asia policy, and he said, yes, Russia wants to be recognized also as a part of Asia. Dot. This is it. So in his understanding, this is where Russia's Asia policy starts and finishes, which means that Russia is still not too much engaged in the affairs in Asia. So I think that right now we still do not see Russia's big engagement in China-India affairs, but who knows what will happen in the future. Maybe it will be the same role as back in 1962, because Russia actually has good relations with both, which is kind of interesting, right? Russia has very good military relations with India. It's selling lots of weapons to India. At the same time, Sino-Russian relations are very good on the top level, not on the people-to-people level, because they are not very intense, but officially on the most official level, they are trying to show they are really, really not united, but they have very good relations. So yes, if something goes wrong, Russia might play a role. I agree with that.
Is there any other questions? Please. Oh, I think she will be first and you next. Thank you.
Thank you for your wonderful presentation. My name is Sadia, and I'm from Chongqing University. I'm a doctoral candidate there. I do agree most of your presentation part, and you also said that India and the US has been tightened, right? You said this, but in my opinion, what I believe is like India is driven by the contours of what's happening in Asia, you know, the regional dimension. So I do not see that much of tighten what you said that, because India has always maintained a balance of strategic autonomy, right? It kept saying that. So I do not know that that whether India, of course, US is the only factor which India could look up to for any kind of balancing with China, right? But then the aspect of strategic autonomy and the aspect of India having good relations with the West also matters, because US does not enjoy good relations with the West of India, like western part of the India, right? So how do you see actually that when you say that like India and US has a tightened relationship? Because even Prime Minister Modi, when he talked for the Quad related aspect, he said India always favors to go by the international law and does not actually is so vocal talking about the Quad aspect also, like free open Indo-Pacific policy. So I don't see that much of tightness between India and the US. I would just like to know your opinion about it.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm. Thank you. Well, yes, I agree that India, well, this is actually the proof of India's stand of this neutrality policy, right? That India is definitely not happy about being forced to join the partnership, let's say partnership with the US. But I do believe that all these agreements in 2016, 18, 20 were a result of deliberate actions taken by the Indian government. So they are really trying to have some sort of a backup plan. Of course, it is a matter whether it will be really implemented or not. We never know it. I would say not really, because I really cannot imagine like American forces being sent to India if China attacks India. No, not really. However, sharing classified information, sharing geospatial data, intelligence data, yes, this is possible, and this is already happening. So in this way, this is definitely tightening of the alliance, right? So sharing the data and so on and so forth. However, I also agree that India is still kind of focusing on stressing the international law and the freedom of navigation and so on and so forth. Actually, like 2 or 3 weeks ago, the United States, the Seventh Fleet, did something outrageous and really original, because they interfered in India's waters, right, without asking Indian military for permission. It happened many times in the past, but this time U.S. officially talked about it and made a statement that this is the proof of the freedom of navigation, because everyone wants to have this freedom of navigation, including us, the U.S. So it was a bizarre situation, and many experts were kind of wondering. I was even looking for some more professional comments, not just for description of what happened, but like comments and, you know, like the critical analysis, like what was the point of American Seventh Fleet to interfere, to cross the line of India's waters. And I only found one comment, that this is because US wants to force India to actually close their alliance, like real alliance, not just declarative one. Another thing is that US wants to send the signal to the whole world. We are not prioritizing India. We treat everyone the same, no matter if it's China, you know, interfering in China, South China Sea, and Taiwan, and so on and so on and so forth, but everywhere. It applies to everyone. So I would still say that yes. I mean, I would say that US treats partnership or alliance with India more serious than India does. And now it's trying to force India to treat it as seriously as they do.
Jason Abraham, I'm actually a former professor from the States. Thank you for a wonderful presentation. Yeah, before I ask my question, I will say in terms of the U.S.-India relations, I've never seen a time when the U.S. is more optimistic about their relationship with India. I mean, in terms of business, and when immigration became more of an issue under the Trump administration, U.S. companies started sending more projects to India in larger quantities than other places. So I think the relationship is tightening, but of course it's complicated. Okay, you mentioned the border between India and China is kind of controlled right now. Using as an analogy with Taiwan, where China continues to antagonize Taiwan, is there any of that going on the border there? Is either country antagonizing the other, or it's just a calm before the storm right now?
Do you mean, is it like purposeful antagonization or something of that sort when it's going on?
Like flying airplanes over to Taiwan, those things. Is there anything at the border? Like
not really when it comes to airplanes. It's more like about the patrols going, you know, and patrolling, right? The soldiers patrolling the territory. So sometimes it happens that the Chinese patrol just meets the Indian patrol, because the Chinese are patrolling the way they imagine where the China-India border goes, and the Indians, you know, they follow their image of the China-India border. So sometimes it happens that they just face each other out of the sudden. So I would say that the China-India border issue is more related to like the ground forces rather than as in the Taiwanese case. This is why I'm stressing this possibility of rapid increase of the conflict, because sometimes it's just a matter of coincidence that these groups meet each other. Sometimes they can just, you know, try to scare each other, but sometimes they really join the fist fight, or as in 2020 in June. So I guess this was not a planned thing. I would say it wasn't planned, but later on the Chinese and Indian government did not have any other way rather than to react, and react strongly to show their power, that they will not make a step back, and so on and so forth.
One thing here. So could this be kind of good news for Taiwan, to the extent that China has conflicts with India, the Philippines, so many other nations, that it doesn't want to be seen as being too aggressive and crossing the line?
I'm afraid that Taiwan is a very special case. So I'm a little bit pessimistic about this issue. Well, generally speaking, Chinese government is very sensitive on the so-called 3T, T as in the letter T. Taiwan, Tibet, and Tiananmen, as in Tiananmen massacre, right? So these 3T, they were like most important sensitive issues for the previous and current Chinese government. So I'm afraid that that we cannot connect, for example, China-India border dispute with the case of Taiwan. It's something totally different. It's probably the most important PR-related and ideological goal of Xi Jinping. thanks to it, he would like to make his place in the history by reunification. So I'm afraid that no connections of this sort can be made.
I wonder what's the role of nationalism in terms of those territorial dispute among China and India, because as we can see, the COVID-19 has hit India very severely, and then China is especially the origins of the COVID-19, and then probably politicians in India would like to use this kind of event to incite nationalism against China, especially when there is a India-China territorial dispute. So will that kind of rising nationalism or rising anti-China sentiment add some, I don't know, ingredient to this kind of territorial dispute? Thank you.
Thank you very much for this question. I'm actually trying to organize everything that I would like to say right now in my head, because there are so many layers of this issue. So let me start with the COVID-19 case. At the very beginning, India was in a way looking up to China and really counting on China's fast test kits, for example. They were ordered from China, but very quickly it turned out that many of them had fake certificates. And this was the reason why two really big deals of importing those fast tests from China were cancelled by Indian authorities, and that led to another diplomatic scandal, because the Chinese accused India of being anti-Chinese and following that kind of racism and so on and so forth. So I would say that because of the COVID-19, the anti-Chinese sentiments in India even grew. I mean, they grew more because they were already pretty high because of the China-India border issue, because of the fact that China is the all-weather friend of Pakistan. Right, Pakistan, the arch enemy of India, at least in the Indian nationalist imagination, because it's more of an imagined enemy rather than the real one, I would say. So definitely the pandemic only added more to the anti-Chinese attitude of many Indian people. I wouldn't say all of them, but actually if you look at some sociological analysis or survey, around 65% of Indian people who took part in the survey claimed that they do not like China, or they do perceive China as a threat. When it comes to nationalism, I would say that it's a very good question, because we cannot actually look at the trajectory of China-India relations without looking what's happening inside China and inside India. So definitely in the recent years, we can see the growth of nationalism in both sides. So we have Xi Jinping, who is, well, definitely playing on those nationalistic emotions and sentiments, and he's also trying to replace Mao Zedong and Deng Xiaoping as this one and only leader in communist China history. On Indian side is the same. We have Narendra Modi with the BJP party, which is openly based on the ideology of Hindutva, the religious nationalism, which claims that only the Hindu way of life is the right way. This is the dominant culture, and everything should be following that kind of ideology, which means that the whole Indian subcontinent, meaning Pakistan and Bangladesh, should be united as a part of Hindu India. And of course, it follows a very anti-Muslim rhetoric, which is one of the main issues or main elements of Hindutva. So I would say that when they kind of came to power almost at the same time, Narendra Modi and Xi Jinping. So at the very beginning, they tried to open a totally new chapter in China-India relations. It's called the personal diplomacy between Xi and Modi. So they were meeting, so Xi was coming to India, visiting Modi's hometown even. Modi went to China, he went to see the Terracotta Army, he went to some Buddhist shrines and so on and so forth. However, after 3-4 years, it turned out that it doesn't work. that China-India relations cannot be limited to relations between Xi Jinping and Narendra Modi, because this is basically what they were trying to do, to show that they are carrying the burden of China-India relations on their own shoulders, but it didn't work. So I would say that now we do have a clash of national pride as well. So absolutely, neither China nor India can make a step back, because this would be seen as a weakness. And of course, all nationalistic, populistic governments are very afraid of showing weakness. They have to show we are united, we are strong, and we do have an enemy. So the figure of an enemy is always a very typical element of nationalistic, populistic governments. I would say that China is slowly becoming such an enemy. It used to be Pakistan, always number one, but recently China is in a way starting to replace Pakistan in those narratives.
Any other questions? So let me, I have a follow-up question. So I'm not familiar with the Indian politics, but what will be the nearest election for India? Because I'm afraid that when there's an election and there's a territorial dispute and there's a rising nationalism, so that might also make the case worse regarding the the Indian-China case. Because some politicians would like to utilize that kind of nationalism to win elections.
Well, I would say I'm also not an expert on India's internal policy, but I would say that probably BJP will win again. So I can see the Congress party getting back to power in coming future. They are too much divided and they don't really have a charismatic leaders. Unlike BJP, because Modi, whatever you say about him, he is a charismatic leader and a symbol of Hindutva and his policy. So I would say that this approach will be maintained. And even if by some miracle another party wins and it's not BJP anymore, I think India cannot make a step back either. So just like US with policies which were already introduced by Donald Trump, there is no U-turn. There is no way back from some of the agreements, some of the laws. So I guess in the matter of prestige, in the matter of social feelings, emotions, another government will have to maintain the image that India is strong, India is united, India will not let China interfere. By the way, actually nothing has changed since 1962. Since the border war between China and India. In 1962, like one day after the border war broke out, Indian Parliament passed a resolution which says that India will have to do everything to get rid out of enemies which crossed and interfered and attacked the sacred land of India. The sacred land of India. So I think the attitude is the same, and it is a part of Hindutva, like treating the land of India as a sacred land, which is a paradox, because India, as we know today, is a result of the British activity, is a result of colonialism. India, as we know today, is not a natural India. It was, in a way, created by the British, united by the British, right? So talking about this sacred land of India, about those Himalayan borders as sacred borders of sacred India, is a way of, I would say, historical paradox, let's say. Still, it's all the rhetoric.
Alex.
I'm Alex. I'm a research assistant for Professor Wu. I was wondering, now I'm just learning about, more about the India and China relations as you speak. But I was wondering if the Modi government, if you can at least enlighten me, is the Modi administration very anti-China in most aspects, or is it they feign cooperation at the top level, but on the policy level they do everything to counter it, like the One Belt, One Road initiative. I think I might have heard that India has its own plan, right, to counter Chinese influence in the South Asia. But I don't have any follow up to that. But and then my second question is about, you mentioned about the future of Dalai Lama. If, as you suggested, that Chinese will pick a successor, how will the Tibetans, whether they are inside China or overseas, how will they see that decision? I wonder, will they follow because that's what the religion maybe aspects tell them to do, or they will stand up and resist? Those are my two questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those questions. To start with the more positive aspects of China-India relations, of course, we have to remember about the economic dimension. So if you look at the numbers, in the recent years, we had a spectacular increase of China-India trade. The problem is that China is the one who benefits from it, because India has a huge trade deficit towards China. So the numbers are, show that they have very good economic relations, but, India is also not super happy about the balance, right? So this might be a problem. And this actually might be a reason why India should look more at, for example, Taiwan, because, like, for example, India-Taiwan economic relations are much more balanced. And this might be an alternative for India, but that's another topic. So I would say that India yet again is trying to balance when it comes to economic relations with China. For example, it did not join the Belt and Road Initiative. It did not join. One of the reasons is that is Pakistan, because there is the part of, we might say that a part of the BRI is the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which goes through Pakistan, also through Kashmir. And Kashmir is disputed by China, India, and Pakistan. China and Pakistan are kind of supporting each other against India. So India claims that, hey, you're creating an economic corridor through our land, which is occupied by Pakistan. This is the Indian rhetoric. So this is one of the reasons why India does not want to join the Belt and Road Initiative, apart from being scared that it would open too much the way for Chinese to invest, to interfere also, right? And to some unfair deals, which is also a problem when it comes to Belt and Road Initiative, right? Deals which after some time turn out not to be as beneficial as they were supposed to be. Another thing is that India in the last moment withdrew from RCEP, which is also this biggest trade initiative in the world history, which is led by China. It was supposed to be led by United States, but it also withdrew earlier. And here I'm coming back to Sadia's question about the real relationship or partnership between US and India. It is said that India was forced to withdraw from RCEP by the United States, which also shows that the United States is putting bigger and bigger pressure on India. When it comes to Dalai Lama, I'm also no expert in Tibetan culture, but based on my readings and observations, for example, from my trip to Tibet in 2013, and talks to common Tibetan people, both in Tibet and in India, among the Tibetan community actually, I would say that most of them will not accept the successor chosen by the PRC. I would say that their identity and also the understanding of this matter is high enough for them to common Tibetan people to see that this is a part of China's game. I would say that, but again, time will tell.
Any other questions, please?
My name is Billy Xu. I work for a news company based in New York. First of all, I would like to thank Professor Antonina for the wonderful presentation. I have a simple question for Antonina. There's a saying in Chinese saying that if humans do not do something, heaven will. And Wuhan virus first broke out in China, and then nowadays China is making troubles around the world. Do you think it would be something leading to the demise or the elimination of the CCP eventually? Thank you.
That's a very interesting question. I don't actually see that possibility in coming years. It seems that Xi Jinping managed to organize this whole environment around him, and he put his, people who are loyal to him in the closest circles. So it's not just him, right? We have to remember that this is the Communist Party. So he is the leader, he is on the top, but of course there is a huge group of people who are loyal to him and helping him, right, in his actions and his politics. However, recently, I think I think, was it Wen Jiabao who wrote an article critical towards Xi Jinping recently? It was this article was censored back in China. It was published just like 4-5 days ago in one newspaper in Macau. It was not openly criticizing Xi Jinping, but it was kind of suggesting that the CCP has to remember about human rights, it's to remember about values and so on and so forth. So it wasn't like directly criticizing Xi Jinping, but it was pretty meaningful. The symbolic or right, the meaning hidden in between those lines was pretty strong. So strong that even though it was published by a previous leader of PRC, it was censored. So you cannot find it right now if you use internet in China. So I would say that there are circles, political circles, even within the Chinese Communist Party, which are critical towards Xi Jinping and don't like what he's doing. Yet it seems that they are not that powerful right now. So it seems to me that we might expect pretty much maybe another decade of Xi Jinping as the leader, which is more, more a matter of debate whether we will have another decade of Narendra Modi in India. This is the difference, right, between authoritarian countries and democratic countries. In democratic countries, everything can happen, can change just like that with another elections. In China, we have a much bigger stability. So I would say that the next elections will be won by Narendra Modi as well. However, it's more probable that the situation will change in India rather than in China.
Any other question? Otherwise, I have a follow-up question for your insight on this topic, because now we know that Xi Jinping is pretty strong, and then we know that when there is something regarding territorial dispute, usually political leaders will now step back. But the condition is that Xi Jinping is pretty strong now, so he does not need to worry about the backfire of stepping back. So will that be a possibility for the, decreasing intention between India and China? Because now we know in India, the leaders need to face elections, so leaders cannot step down. And because of Xi Jinping's great power, so that might be one possibility that the tension will be eased, since Xi Jinping is strong enough to, get rid of those
very
struggles.
interesting question. I'm not sure if it really will work this way. However, what I feel is that now all the forces and all the efforts might be redirected to Taiwan. Whether the invasion will happen or not, hopefully not, but I would say that now it is the most important issue for Xi Jinping. Whereas the border issue with India can be used as for the blackmailing purpose, yes, against India, but I don't really see it becoming like the main ideological issue. because it's not really about, I mean, of course, there is an ideological background, but it's not as crucial to the Chinese identity as Taiwan. I would say that the border skirmishes will break out still. I would say that there will be border tensions. Occasionally, they will be heated up and then cool down. I don't think the open military invasion will happen, at least over the next 5 or 10 years, but the conflict will still be there because even though Xi Jinping might feel more comfortable, right, because he has this power, still it can be used for the blackmailing practice, for diminishing India, for showing India its place. It's actually claimed that showing India its place was one of the main reasons behind the 1962 border war. That this was actually the main reason why China attacked India. But we don't know. Of course, I like making those historical references, but I understand that times have changed a lot. We are talking about different China and different India right now. So perhaps we cannot find the answer in the history. Yet, I would say that the atmosphere in China-India relations in the border issue will be as high as it is now over the next few years. Hopefully. I don't think so. I think China has other priorities that it has to focus on. Xinjiang, Tibet, Hong Kong, these are the priorities that China has right now.
Please.
So I have a follow-up question. So in the past, there was an appeasement politics happening between India and China relations, right? That's why Modi's visit happened. Modi went to China, Xi Jinping came to India. So when you talk about the escalation and de-escalation, India needs China because of economic relations, right? So again, I would like to ask in that sense, then there will be conflict, as you said, but do you think from the Indian side, India will still maintain that let's not do it because we still need China for the economic relations, so we'll still maintain that thing, okay, that the conflict should be just like de-escalating part and let's not engage that much, because in that sense, yeah.
I would say this is what Indian government would like, right? So Indian government definitely does not want any escalation, any open conflict, because it also has different priorities and different issues it has to deal with, right? So yes, as long as it will be possible for India to be kind of vague, I would say it will pursue this way. Yet, there is a change in comparison to previous governments. It is already thinking about the backup plan. So it is thinking how to scare China off, not just to be kind of appeasing, you know, but also to have some arguments to stop China. So this is a huge change.
Please.
Hello, thank you very much for a very interesting lecture. I'm a MOFA scholar. I come from East Europe, from Slovenia. And this is not my specialty, but I would like to ask your opinion, because now China also has one more ally, very big, it's Russia. And it's the same scenario like with India before, you know, to personal diplomacy with presidents. They go and to their hometowns, everything the same. So if you maybe pay attention on what's going on also in the border, now the good things are happening actually, and it's connected with Belt and Road Initiative. But what do you think? Will it last or not? Is it just a parade for the world, for America and Europe, because of sanctions towards China and India?
You mean the China-Russia relations?
Yes.
I would say that China and Russia do have some common interests, and this is why they are having an alliance. It's not because of some people-to-people or historically nice relations, because on the people-to-people level, these relations are very, very cold. So there are not that many cultural exchanges or some, you know, social programs. It's more about the top level politicians. And I think that it might last. It might last. Well, of course, China and Soviet Union at that time did have some clashes, right, in the 1960s over the border. However, since those times, there is another myth, actually, which is kind of popular in the West, the myth that the Chinese will colonize Siberia. I don't. You've came across this one, right? So, but it's like a total myth, and definitely doesn't, play any role in China-Russia relations. So yes, I would say that if the status quo is maintained, as in Xi Jinping will be there and Putin will be there still, and it seems he will be, I would say the same official friendship or declarative friendship will be maintained.
So if there is no further questions, probably we need to close the formal discussion of today's seminar. And before I close the seminar, I would like to make two advertisement. So for the following 2 weeks, we will also have a weekly seminar on Thursday afternoon. But on May 11th, which is Tuesday, also from 2 to 4, Professor Antonina will also give a presentation with, I think it's Professor Patrick Mendes. So which topic? I haven't received the topic, but probably you would like to
It's
self-promote.
about Taiwan towards China, India, US triangle. So we'll focus definitely more on Taiwan.
Okay, great. So it's on May 11th, which is a Tuesday, not Thursday. Although we still have a seminar on Thursday, but because we already scheduled most Thursdays this semester, so we need to put it in on a Thursday. So I hope to see you here in the following weeks again. And also, I forgot to mention that we have 5 to 7 participants from YouTube, but unfortunately, we are not able to give them chance to ask questions or share their thoughts. We will work on that issue, but probably I think this is our first or second time of broadcasting.
I was
our
told the first one. I'm not sure if it's true, but I was told
it's
the
the
first
first
YouTube
one
broadcast.
on it's the first one on our weekly seminar. That's true, but we had one on our annual anniversary talk next year, but this is the first on the Thursday seminar. So probably we can do it again in the future. And then for those who are watching from YouTube, probably we'll work on a solution to let you ask questions. And thank you for participating today's seminar. So that's close the seminar today. And then we offer some coffee outside. So if you would like to continue your talk, probably you can have some coffee. Thank you.
Thank you so much.